that as you start putting things together, or the utilities and the facilities, that it ends up with a lot of goals, but very few strategies. So
I guess that makes sense when you start thinking about it.
Yeah.
It should be interesting. It's a really important part of the city that people don't think about very much. So
it is there for people to review. The chapter is not written. I'll start working on trying to, actually, probably I'm going to keep working on doing the implementation strategy for the community services. Because I have a lot of drafts that are out, and I'm going to start prodding a few people to get those back, so we can get those kind of compiled into a document. So we've got that. So.
Okay. Well, I'll just go ahead and call the meeting to order. You know, we won't have a quorum at first, but if Aaron pops in, we will. So yeah, I'm going to call to order the Monday, September 26th meeting of the Montpelier Planning Commission. Right now, we're not going to be able to approve our agenda because we only have 3 out of 7 seats available here. Currently, we are down to planning commissioners, so it's on 5 of us to make sure that we have a quorum of 4 every meeting. So it's no surprise that you know, we aren't necessarily going to have a quorum always until we get those seats filled. So for now, we are not having an official meeting. This is more of a working meeting of the Planning Commission, where we'll just follow what would have been our agenda and discuss it, but there will be no voting and no major decisions made for this meeting. So with that, we have Gabe and I have to remember to show up Wednesday for the reappointments. I'm assuming you're planning to seek the reappointment, Gabe, just to clarify.
Yeah, I didn't realize I needed to be somewhere on Wednesday. What is that? At the city council meeting? I've got other appointments already set up.
Yeah, it's the most important thing is for you to put the application in
okay.
on the city's website, which is the same thing that you would have done not too long ago when you applied. And then sure if you're not there, if you're not there, Mike and I can vouch for you. But yeah, they can't. If they don't have an application, they can't vote to reappoint you.
All right, I'll make sure I get that on.
Well, I'm glad I said that. I don't know if I have any other updates other than to say that we can maybe spend a few minutes later, but I just scribbled down some things for the beginnings of an arts and culture chapter. I tried to hit the high notes, but there's definitely gaps to be filled in from where it is right now. I don't have anything else. Does anybody else have any other updates?
For stuff that's not on the agenda, I think I mentioned last time, I have a new intern, or maybe I didn't, but I do have a new intern. Name is Jake Peel. He grew up in Williamstown, is going to UVM, and is interested in municipal planning. So he's going to be interning this fall, and he is going to help out with the public safety chapter. So it's good. That's one of our chapters we have left, and he's going to help to work on that. And that chapter really has a number of subsections that have to kind of get worked through. I mean, obviously, you can know police, fire, EMS, the dispatch. Those are the ones most people can think of, but there's also kind of emergency management, emergency planning, your hazard mitigation plans, and those types of things. And we have the work of the Justice Center. The Justice Center has some community services, and they also have some public safety because they do the restorative justice and reintegration programs. So they work very closely with the county district attorney, as well as the police officers, to go through and decide who's going to go through a restorative process and who's going to and when somebody comes out of prison, then we need to go and do some reintegration programs. And so we've got a number of those types of programs. Now, community justice also does some community services. So they'll have some pieces in community services, but so that was 6. And I think there was a 7th that is a part of the public safety. Building inspection. So the building inspector is really most of that work is building inspector and health officer. Really, both of those functions come back to public safety. We have them to ensure building safety, fire safety, and those types of pieces. So those are the really 7 sub chapters that'll go into that. And so Jake will be working on that with me throughout this semester. So that'll be a big help for me, and hopefully a good learning experience for him. And SE Group has been in touch with me about the plan stuff. And they're pulling together the historic resources. And we've been getting them a bunch of pieces that they've been asking for so they can come up with a template draft that they can bring. I think they're at the next planning commission meeting in 2 weeks. Well, it's 2 weeks and a day, because I think in 2 weeks, which I'll remind everybody now, the next meeting is Indigenous Person / Columbus Day. So our meeting will be Tuesday, which may be an issue for Ariane, because I know that's the RPC night, so I don't know how that'll work out. But we'll keep an eye out.
Okay, so Tuesday the 11th.
Yeah. So that's all I have. That's not stuff on the agenda here.
Okay, thanks, Mike. That's helpful. And if your new intern happens to see this, welcome aboard. Well, we don't have any members from the public here, so nothing to discuss there. People, I don't know what kind of applications have gone in for our empty seats, but again, I would encourage everyone, if you know someone who you think would be great to work with here and who has a related skill set, which there's a lot of those, to apply.
When I checked last week, Kirby, you were the only one who had applied. I did send out a personal invitation to somebody who sounded like she was very interested in applying. So I think that would be hopefully. So we've got, if Gabe's applying and Gabe's reapplying and you're reapplying, that leaves us 2 vacant seats. And I would hopefully think we've got 1. And I know some other people, I think John had said he had somebody in mind as well. So if everyone else can keep thinking of another person, that would be great.
That's great. Thanks. Yeah. I probably need to do the same. I need to maybe reach out to people. Okay. Well, let's just hop into this utilities and facilities strategies that Mike's drawn up for us. That's going to be most of what we have to do tonight. So take it away, Mike.
All right. Let me see. Everyone sees that. Utilities and facilities. So I did have, and I wanted to just do this real quick because I did put the broader utilities and facilities discussion in these 2 chapters here. I think one was an older draft, one's a newer draft. So there is one of those long written versions. And then I did go in and put it into our format in the template. So making 4 aspirations, Facilities, with the chapters and utilities,
Hey, Mike, your audio's a little garbled for me. Same for Ariana, it seems. Still, still garbled.
Still garbled now.
Yeah.
Was it better before or just now that I'm sharing screen?
It just started with the sharing screen, which seems unrelated, so it's pretty weird.
So, do you want to try to share a screen? Make it out.
Yeah, well, why don't you unshare the screen and see if that helps?
So, is it any better?
It's a little better, but
Now that I'm out of it.
it's still kind of garbled though. Is there some other device there that's messing with it?
I think there should be. By myself in the council chamber, so. The only thing is I'm hooking up to Wi-Fi, so usually that shouldn't be an issue.
It's a little better now.
All right, well, I can just go really briefly through what was there, because I don't think we're going to be approving anything, but this was going to know what's there so they can start looking at it. You guys can start looking at it. So it really is broken into 4 sections. It's utilities and facilities. But what we look at for utilities are the 4 municipal utilities: water, sewer, wastewater, and district heat. Those are the 4 utilities that we have. That's one chunk. Our public facilities is the second chunk. So that is all of our buildings, our garage, our city hall, the recreation facilities, all the built pieces that we have. And this goes to a lot of the conditional use review, talks about, not exceeding the capacity of facilities. So, we only have so much facilities. It also then includes private utilities. This chapter talks about a few of the private utilities, the big one being electricity, but we also have telecommunications, which is less important here in Montpelier than it is in other communities. In other communities, it's really important to be talking about telecommunications because they don't have broadband and they don't have cell coverage. In Montpelier, we have multiple options for broadband and multiple options for cell coverage. So it's less of an issue for us, but we still talk about it. And then the 4th piece talks about those services that are not municipal that we keep an eye on. The biggest one, of course, being the schools. So usually we try to talk about making sure that our development does not exceed the capacity of facilities. And so that usually talks about things like the schools, the library, medical center, and the solid waste management district. So there are a couple of them that are required under statute that we talk about. So those are 4 of the big ones. None of them, we don't expect any of them to be an issue. So most of this is pretty brief, but they're all kind of required to be in there. So we have these 4 big categories of aspirations. In order to cover those 4, on the next tab, you've got the 20 different goals. And most of that's just broken down. The utilities are broken into making sure we've got, quality and quantity of water. So you've got what's the service that's being provided, the water, the sewer. And then we talk about the second goal is talking about the infrastructure in the buildings. So, we want to have clean water. We also want to have pipes that are maintained. and a treatment plant that's meets standards, those types of things. And then the third goal of that is the goal that kind of catches the financial part of it. It's got to be affordable, and it also has to raise enough money that we can maintain the system. So there's kind of these three different things, and that applies for water, sewer, district heat, and wastewater. So you kind of have four different, so that takes up 12 goals because each one has those three. And then again, we've got a set of goals for those facilities and other services. And then finally, I don't have the exact count, but I think it's like 15, 16 strategies. Most of the strategies, so we actually have fewer strategies than we have goals. So most of those are things like having utility plans, having the capital improvement plan, which we've talked about in the past, how we fix and repair things. And a lot of the utilities are part of the capital improvement plan. So getting a regular plan for replacing water lines, sewer lines, separating combined sewers to CSOs. And then there are a number of other things that are also after that we have mentioned in the past about infrastructure, economic infrastructure programs. And so most of those kind of are pretty straightforward. They're all in there, so people can kind of take a look through and see what they see if there's any questions in it. But that'll be something for people to review, and we can approve at a future meeting. But I'm not going to go through it all in detail. Most of it's pretty straightforward.
So I had a couple questions. I mean, I didn't see really there being anywhere, that needed a lot of modifications. It was pretty straightforward, but I do, so we've got in our housing goal, we've got, a goal of, I think 30 units per year. I can't remember where we came out on that, but we have this desire to increase housing. And my question, just looking at the utilities, is, it all is really talking about maintenance. Do we have sufficient infrastructure to support the housing goal that we set up? And if not, do we need to put some language in there just to acknowledge that there will need to be some additional investment? Because one of the things you're always going to get pushback on from the community is, oh, we don't have enough resources. We don't have enough infrastructure to do this. And I don't know if we do or don't. If we have a lot of excess capacity, maybe it's totally fine. But that was one question I had.
Yeah, big picture, we have enough capacity. Our sewer plants and our water plants are both operating, give or take, 50% capacity. So you could double the size of Montpelier without exceeding the water and the sewer plant. We have plenty of capacity. Where this starts to fall apart a little bit is in the either the size or the age of the distribution lines and those types of things. Those are the issues, and that's a little bit where the programs come up, where we try to use these programs to try to improve. That's what TIF could be used for if it's in a TIF district, but we also tried to just have an infrastructure program where we could kind of do these mini TIFs, and we did that for Caledonia Spirits, where Caledonia Spirits couldn't be built without moving and replacing the sewer main that crosses the river. It actually comes down Berlin and then crosses the river there, and then comes up, goes under the railroad tracks, and goes down Berry Street. And it was an old line. It was located in a bad spot, so we moved it and replaced it for for a decent distance. Part of that was paid for by basically borrowing money and then having the revenues from the new distillery basically pay back the bond.
So there'll be things like that, but we don't need to say anything different.
Yeah, the program is described in there, and it's just going to be used in different places. I think if we identify things in plans that come up and say there is a development potential in an area that can't be recognized because there isn't enough sewer or water, like anything that's in the rural district, parts of Elks Club property, it's in the rural district because it doesn't have access to sewer and water. Well, we could change that, and Habitat for Humanity can't be built up on Northfield Street without sewer and water.
Mhm.
So utilities extending sewer and water into places that don't have it. We've got some programs to do it, but it may come out in our plans that we need to either come up with more money or come up with more plans or come up with more policies.
You
But we
need to
don't
say
know of
something
any.
like expand where appropriate, or you just think that the discussion of TIF and mini TIF above that's sufficient?
I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. There's some things that, again, like we've talked about in some of these other chapters, there's some things that are really fit well into a discussion of the implementation strategy. Then there's some things that are really focus well in a chapter discussion. And this may be one where we talk about, when we talk about that section where it's like how this chapter relates to other chapters. All of our chapters have that section where we talk about, how does historic and housing, or historic and economic development either support each other or conflict with each other. And I think that would be a good place for us to have that conversation of, with such a big goal and a critical goal of increased housing, the reason we have high density housing, there's one reason we have high density housing. That's because we have a sewer district. We have sewer as an option. That's why, there aren't a lot of communities in the state that have sewer plants. And that's why they don't have high density housing.
Right.
The reason we can do high density housing is because we have that, and where we can run sewer lines and where we can extend sewer lines is directly connected to where we can also have high density housing. So I think
no, that sounds fair. It was just a question. I think having that in chapter heading or something like that is, and we don't even know, you don't have to promise the world. It's just the idea that we might need to do some expansion. The other thing is probably just to redirect to me. So when I think of infrastructure, I don't know why I'm reading about the buildings and these other things, and I'm just thinking, the biggest infrastructure thing that I see is roads. And where is that? If you guys already talked about that in another chapter, that's the biggest problem I feel like we've got infrastructure wise, but it's probably not in this chapter, right?
Yes, but there's a whole special chapter on transportation. Okay. So we've got a whole chapter that deals with the roads and the complete streets. So it's roads, bikes, pedestrians. Also includes things like public transportation and
you guys already finished that. That's already, I could just go read what you already worked on.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting there. If you had other things to say.
No, that was all I had to say. If there was anyone who has questions now, we can take them. Otherwise, I think we'll just kind of tackle it Oh. I guess I'm not moving enough. I didn't even know there was a light sensor in here.
I have a couple of things. Ariane, did you have anything?
Well, sort of related to what Gabe was talking about, I just am looking at this for the first time and I see some language about, what did it say? Continue to maintain a balance between, residential development and the capacity of various systems. So I just worry about that being, Gabe, you were sort of talking about being used by people who oppose housing. I just think we need to word it carefully. It's not that I'm opposed to the idea, just want to be mindful of that. That's all.
Nope, and these are all drafts like every other chapter. So as we get to it, and as you go through it, if there are things, you can highlight them and say these others were good. This one I think needs some tweaking, and we can certainly go through and make edits to reflect what makes sense. Some of this rejiggering at the end kind of was kind of a little bit quicker, and I may not have fully captured everything.
Gabe and Ariane, do you know what strategy and or goal has the tricky language. We can go ahead and mark it now.
I'm just
I didn't
toggling
see any.
between screens. Oh, for me, it was on the goals. It was, I think all the goals under D continue to maintain a balance between schools and the library and CVMC. And then I guess the last one about participating in the solid waste district. That one seems fine, but it was those, and I don't, yeah, it was 17, 18, and 19 in the goals. And I don't, off the top of my head, have language to suggest, but I can think about that, or I don't know if others have other thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the problem is maintain the balance, because it sounds like we're at capacity or something. So if we could change that to something that implies surplus.
Yeah, because we have no evidence that any of these, that development is an issue for any of these so far. So I think it is just a matter of semantics, how we word that to go and reflect that it's not like we have a balance right now. We actually have capacity to.
It is interesting, having sat in some of these hearings now, the plan is used as a weapon. So we do have to be very careful about language that we might think, oh, it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, because somebody would pull out what Ariane just highlighted, right, and say, well, this clearly is an imbalance. We'd hear something just like that, and you'd say, okay, well, is that really what it meant? We don't define what balance is, right? So yeah, I appreciate that, Ariane.
That's true. It's unfortunately true. Okay, I threw a note in there. We don't have to come up with the answer now, but I wrote, maintain the balance to something that clarifies that we have surplus capacity. Okay. So Mike, I was going to ask you about, so there's stormwater changes, and can you give us some background about why there's, new stuff in there relating to stormwater, and, what Montpelier is already planning for the future for that, and what plans we have, just to, since that's a new thing, I thought it would be worth getting a summary.
Stormwater is a little bit different, considering it's not fully its own utility yet. So we have a sewer, water, and a district heat enterprise funds. We don't have a stormwater enterprise fund yet, but we are in the process right now of creating a stormwater utility so we can separate out those funds. There are a lot of state and federal goals. We aren't, kind of getting in the weeds, we are not what the wonks would call an MS4 community, which is a municipal storm sewer system or something like that. So it's got 4 S's, so it's M with 4 S's, so they call it MS4. And there's a federal clean water rule that applies to any community with more than 10,000 people, which we don't have, or otherwise assigned by the state or federal government. And so we've always kind of been trying to avoid, anyone who's an MS4 has to have a stormwater utility. And so we've tried to keep our waters as clean as possible so we can avoid being an impaired watershed, and therefore avoid getting tagged with that and having all the federal requirements to go along with it. So we're trying to basically be good so we can avoid having to meet those extra, because there's it comes with a lot of costs. So we're trying to basically do everything that an MS4 would without having to actually be an MS4. So that's why there's a number of things that we're doing, including having rules in our zoning to help regulate. So unlike sewer and water, where we really don't regulate them through the zoning, stormwater we do. And it's going to have some utility requirements, and it's going to have some other costs. and that's going to go to maintaining those pipes under the ground. Right now, your sewer bills pay for a lot of the storm sewer pipes, so they're kind of, it'll all start to get separated out to help balance out, make sure that your sewer is paying for your sewer pipes, because you're not going to have CSOs, combined sewer overflows, anymore. So you should have all the storm sewer going through the storm pipes and all the wastewater going through the wastewater pipes. So everything will have its own fund, everything will be taken care of, everything will be regulated. So it's really meant to take our stormwater quality to another level. So there's a lot of new stuff in here. That's why there's a lot in here, is because we're kind of at an inflection point. Our water plant and our water system is in good shape, other than some very old water pipes that keep blowing up on us. Our sewer plant is now been modernized, and is finishing up. It's going through phase 2. We'll have, a state-of-the-art sewer plant pretty quick. I mean, it is state-of-the-art, but it'll be, finishing up, really being, having some new things with it. So that will be really top of the line. And then it's really now coming down to starting to make some big investments in our storm sewer, in our storm sewer system. So what can we do to improve this system, to make sure that everything's getting treated? We have new state requirements, that what are called general roads permit. That's something new. That's also stormwater. How well are we regulating the water that flows, off of our roads? So there's a lot of new state requirements and new federal requirements that we have to meet. And there's a lot of a lot of planning going on at DPW right now to kind of prepare for that, get stuff lined up. And that's why in the plan, you'll see a lot more kind of stuff that's in there on storm sewer that you don't see in the other ones.
Thanks, Mike. Has the infrastructure transition started over, like, away from the CSOs?
For CSO, reducing the number of combined sewers has been going on for more than a decade, for about a couple of decades. And I think we get beat up a lot in the papers, but I think at the start, I mean, I'm just giving ballpark numbers. I think there may have been 60 combined sewer overflows in the city, and some of them were very easy to kind of break apart and to separate and to take care of things. And over the years, they've gotten it down to like 6, maybe. So I think they've eliminated most of them. And now there's a number of places where they're just, and the ones that are left are the hardest ones to separate. So there are a number of things to try to reduce the amount of water going into it. So, for example, there are a lot of roofs that are still tied into the sewer. And so if it rains hard and you've got a big roof, like a state office building might have a combined sewer, half of City Hall does. So it's kind of a half the building has been disconnected, the other half hasn't. So if it rains hard, all that water goes into the sewer pipes. And if it exceeds the sewer pipe, then it dumps sewage into the river. That's what a CSO is. So by separating the storm water out of it, then it doesn't overflow in a storm. That's the whole point of trying to separate them. But some of these are easy to fix and some of them are very hard to fix. And so that's what they're working on. The big East State Street project that you may, if you're paying attention to DPW newsletters and stuff, that's a big project for next year where they're going to replace all the pipes going up East State Street. Is going to be a huge project. $7, $8, $9 million. It's a pretty big project. That will separate one of our biggest CSOs that we have remaining. It's really, it's a challenging place to separate them if you don't have a storm sewer pipe to tie stuff into. So that's part of that big project. So there are a number of these larger projects to help eliminate the CSOs, because we know, first of all, we have to as a part of the Clean Water Act, but it's also it's a hard project. It's a goal that the city has had. It's the goal the Public Works has had to eliminate all the CSOs. and that will make a big difference in the water. So far, we've gotten it down to, what probably was an event every single time it rained to, a couple events a year, depending on how hard we get rain. So they've been doing a good job, but until they get it all done, we're going to continue to hear about every time we get a combined sewer overflow, there's going to be complaints, and not wrongly. It's just there's only so much you can do, and you do a project at a time to separate them out.
Well, thanks. I didn't realize how far along we were in addressing that, actually. I thought we had farther to go, so that's wonderful.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the projects that are left are big projects, and they're going to be hard to do. But in total numbers, because they've been working on it for so long, they've done all the easy work. Now they've got the most expensive and the hardest ones to do.
The other question I had was there's something relating to monitoring Green Mountain Power to make sure it sticks to its net zero promises. I recall John having an issue, or maybe it's Aaron, with the city being dependent on Green Mountain Power. So I just thought I would just flag that one because other folks have had issues with us putting something in the plan that's reliant on them. But I don't know. What Ariana and Gabe, what do you think about having this? There's a strategy number 16, continue to monitor Green Mountain Power to ensure it meets commitments to be net zero by 2030. How do you feel about that being a strategy? Since it's not something we're doing, well, the part we're doing is what? Watching. The active part is GMP. Do you guys have thoughts about that, or?
Yeah, I did notice that. I wasn't I wasn't sure about the aspiration in general about private utilities, how, not sure what a meaningful strategy for the city of Montpelier is, but obviously they're tremendously important. So yeah, I wasn't sure. I was yeah, that was
do we have some kind of leverage to enforce or something? Or I mean, they're kind of a monopoly, right?
Yeah, they need a certificate of public good. So they have plans to be net zero by 2030. And so a lot of what the Energy Committee is doing is under the assumption that Green Mountain Power is going to meet their, if we're going to be net zero by 2030 or by 2050, then we need all of our electricity to be net zero. And because we're completely in GMP service area, then and GMP themselves have said they will be net zero by 2030. So by them meeting their goals by 2030, we're going to meet our 2050 goals for 30% of our energy portfolio, because you've got electricity, you've got home heating, and you've got transportation are your three big sectors. So if GMP is going to be net zero, then we've already checked that box. So a lot of what, there's one strategy that goes along with it, and that's just to watch the certificates of public good. And presumably if they're going to default on their promise, then, it'll be in the certificate of public good process, and it'd be up to the city to decide if they want to pay a lawyer or a lobbyist, or just get people involved to go through and file motions with the Public Service Commission to try to get them to force GMP to keep their promise. As I said, I have no information to believe that they're not going to be meeting their commitments. I think our job is just to keep an eye on the CPG things and make sure that they will. So, and it's one of the required pieces. Some of the pieces that are in the statute that layout, you have to talk about certain things. One of them is the electricity. So we do talk about it, and really the only thing we do is just monitor them to the extent that, because we don't really have issues. Other communities will have more issues to make sure, for example, three-phase power might be important to have at an industrial park, or, we're a farming community, and the dairy barns can operate much more efficiently with three-phase power, and we're going to work with X, Y, and Z to try to get this power run out to these barns, so that way they're operating more efficiently and more cost effectively. So the utilities can be electric utilities can be a much bigger topic in other communities. For us, we've got power, whatever we want, because we've got a lot of power, a lot of substations, lines everywhere. It's not really an issue. So we don't plan a lot for it. A lot of it, very small plans. Same thing that we do with the library and the hospital, and in other places, it's healthcare and health services may be a much bigger deal. If you happen to live in a town that's 40 miles from the nearest hospital, then where's your rural healthcare get provided by? Not an issue again for us. But we're still required to talk about it in our plan. So that's why there's these little things that might just pop up once to say, make sure it doesn't become an issue in the future. We don't expect it to become an issue in the future, but we will promise to keep an eye on it. And if it becomes an issue, we'll do something about it, even though we're never going to exceed the capacity of the Central Vermont Medical Center. Our population won't grow so much that we exceed the capacity of that hospital to provide service. This county isn't growing that fast that would ever be an issue. And same with a number of these things that we're required to talk about.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to flag that one because I think it was Aaron who had some issues before, but don't have any recommendations for that. Does anybody have anything else on the utilities plan, or? No?
Yeah, not now, but are we so what's the next step? Is Mike gonna rewrite some of it, or do we go in and edit? Or, sorry, I've forgotten our process a little bit.
Well, it's a little weird since we don't have a quorum right now. Usually we would take a deeper dive and maybe consider voting it out if we didn't have anything major to change. But since voting's off the table, we are gonna have to revisit it. But if you have comments and things, I'd say put those in there now, like I put in that one note, just so that we can get through it quicker in the future. Get the plan done faster. Does that sound good to you, Mike?
Yeah, that's fine. That's kind of what I was expecting it
would be. Yeah. Okay. Well, all we have left for tonight is to take a quick peek at the chapter that I wrote this afternoon. It just has one page right now. I can share it. So what I did was I just took, I followed our regular format. I only did the first 3 major sections. I know we have some others like maps and things, but just got us started at least. Full disclosure, I put less than an hour into this. So it's just a draft, but I think it touches on the big things from the chapter, and it touches on the big things, more importantly, probably from the Arts and Culture Master Plan. I took out the substance, which was just the main things that the Arts and Culture Master Plan wanted to achieve. I just hit those in the intro. it sounds, I mean, when I read it, it does sound a little repetitive because I feel like there's no, because I just talk about the aesthetics of the built environment constantly. Um, but in a nutshell, you know, it's art's important because it makes our built environment reflect our values and vision. And the plan helps make art focused, which commentary, I don't know, it's a little bit of an oxymoron because I think isn't art supposed to be free, but whatever. We're focusing the art and directing it to capture the energy of the city and our values. So one of their major goals is to enhance character and attachment to city. I tried not to be too verbose about it. I would just kind of hit the stuff. So you could probably go on and on about attachment to the city. I just left that pretty short. There was a focus on high quality art, which is why I used that phrase to enhance the aesthetic quality and help our built environment stand out from other places. And under that, they had community vitality and involving a broad range of peoples. I feel like that's a little bit redundant, as I've mentioned a couple times here, but it's just kind of the way that I tried to follow how they organized it. Value artists and artistic processes. We've talked about this before. And there are a couple of strategies relating to that, so it has its own part. But I think that this, because we had talked about how do you connect artists themselves with a plan that's supposed to be about city planning, which is not supposed to be about individual people. So to whatever extent this connects that by talking about having a plan that creates opportunities for local artists and involves them in projects. So that's kind of connecting the built stuff, the development stuff with the people. And then there was mention of use of resources, which we have strategies related to funding and use of resources. So I threw a little bit in there about that. So those are just kind of the high points. Any of these things could have further elaboration. I was in a hurry and I didn't really see a need if we wanted to be succinct, which a lot of the times we talk about how we want it succinct. So this could be expanded or not, depending on how people feel. How it relates to their chapters, I just quickly chose economic development, transportation and utilities, and then I tried to come up with something with community services, natural resources. But I'll be the first to admit that this paragraph's a bit of a stretch because it's about linking the built environment with the natural environment. And it took a little bit of speculation on my part to say, well, some of our art will probably be a blending of the natural environment with the built environment. I mean, we're not specifically calling for that, but it seems like the kind of thing we do. But so those are the connections that I pointed out. I think we talked about some of these. Again, this stuff could be fleshed out a bit more. I thought about a way of connecting the parts of this plan that talk about using storefronts for art displays. Like that could be something that could be talked about here related to economic development. I didn't include that, but I did include, how it touches on tourism. It brings people, like there's the events that bring people in, and then there's the art making us look prettier. So those are kind of two distinct things, both related to economic development. And that's about it. And then past efforts was, I actually couldn't quickly find when the Public Arts Commission was created. I thought it was last year maybe, but some of the dates on the website they used went back to 2018.
I think it might be 2020 then, or 2019 when it was formed.
So we'll have to track that down to make sure that we leave the right dates there. But then this is just the most recent stuff. Again, it could be fleshed out. And that's my quick intro to this, to what we have here. Anybody have any reactions?
think it's mostly how I usually do it. I just start putting things down and then start shuffling them around, because that's what'll probably end up happening, because the next section that happens after the one you have there talks about what are aspirations and goals and what are our strategies. So we kind of convert what's in the implementation strategy into a couple of paragraphs that kind of go through and say, so these are our goals and this is what we're going to do about accomplishing our goals. And I think up top, that's where some of the introduction may get pulled down. And I think the only difference on top that I might look at is usually the two things we're trying to talk about in the introduction. One is why is this important? So why is arts and culture important? And I think you've talked about that and you've got that. And then there's a little bit of, why is this, or what's unique about Montpelier, or why is this important to Montpelier? And I think so there's a little piece in there I think that we kind of have to touch on, maybe a little bit of, I think the fact that we've got a lot of these cultural pieces that are out there, whether it's the Lost Nation Theater and the studios, and there are a lot of things that are good about Montpelier and the arts, but there's also kind of, this odd history in Montpelier of not having any public art. Up until the public art master plan, it was a remarkably, empty city. And I don't know how we'll say that in a positive way, but, it was certainly from a professional planner standpoint, we go through and say that, the city, Montpelier missed the city beautiful movement, that other communities had. Which you drive through, you go through any downtown from, 1880, 1890 up through 1910, 1920 was the city beautiful movement. It was a big period of time where there was a lot of investment throughout the country in beautifying and celebrating our communities. So that's when the statues of George Washington were built. And, there are a lot of these types of art and monuments and statues were all erected in that window. And for some reason, Montpelier didn't get any. We have no grand fountains, no great statues. You go down the road to Berry City and you've got the Burns Memorial. We've got the Youth Triumphant. We've got the statue, the Italian memorial there for the Italian the carvers memorial there. There are statues all over the place, but yet Montpelier doesn't have a single statue. Even though it's the state capital, so it's kind of a unique. So that's one of the things we're trying to change is to try to bring more art to Montpelier that for some reason we haven't had. I think the Art Commission is doing a fantastic job. For having a limited budget, they have really managed to get a lot of projects rolled out. So certainly, I've been impressed with the amount of impact they've had. So.
Yeah, and I made sure to point out here, and this kind of goes actually to what we were talking about earlier about people weaponizing things. Just to make sure that it's clearly written in the plan. Try to talk about how, our plan here works with the public art master plan, and to be clear that we want this to be in conjunction with that plan and to supplement that plan and the work of the Public Art Commission. Wouldn't want anyone to use anything we use against their efforts or vice versa. So that is, I was sure to include that at least in that summary of past efforts. But this could maybe be called out, because you were talking about moving stuff around. Maybe it could be called out to the intro, in fact, to put a higher emphasis on our intention of how this should be taken or used. Certainly not to limit these efforts. Anybody else have any other reactions? Mike, okay, I'll stop and ask that question first. Anybody have any other reactions?
I thought it seemed
Mike,
good. Oh,
what's that?
I just say I thought it seemed good. That's all.
Thank you. So Mike, what do you want to do for like next steps? Do you want to take this and expand on it, or would you like me to try to expand more? What works for you?
I would say probably over the next 2 weeks, I probably won't be jumping too much into this one. I'm going to probably be focusing on the implementation strategy, but for community services, because I really want to try to make sure I'm getting these last pieces ready. So when SE group starts moving forward, we've got the pieces. So either I've got to write the utilities and facilities chapter, or I've got to do the implementation strategy, but I've got to get those two pieces rolling. But we're in pretty good shape between, and I'm also obviously helping Jake with the public safety stuff because he's getting kicked off. So I won't promise to be getting too much into this, but the more ideas that get put down, even if it doesn't have something, even if it's just a chunk that's in there, then that really gets us going in the right direction. Because then I've got things I can start moving around. If you're ready to just go and say, here you go, Mike, start shuffling it around and make a chapter out of this, the more pieces or whatever that we have, then the easier it'll be for me to start to tell the story. And then again, it's back to you. You guys usually take these things and kind of beat them up for a bit. And that's fine. So that way we're ready to go.
Okay. I threw in just a couple little notes there at the bottom for things that we just talked about. We can do that more. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't expect a 2-week turnaround. I think our next meeting is going to be pretty full because SE Group will be presenting. So, yeah, no expectation that this chapter needs to be completely done. And we also have another meeting in another presentation, right, in the other October meeting.
Historic Preservation Commission will be showing up.
Yeah. So yeah, there's time to work. If I can think of anything more to add, I can go back and try to help give you some of those like nuggets to work off of, like you were saying.
Yeah, I haven't read the arts plan, certainly not as well as you have. So I'll kind of count on you to make sure you pull some of the pieces out that are the most important, and I can try to get in and work with them.
Yeah, I think I've haven't pulled out all of the extra elaboration and detail, but definitely the key takeaways are in this. Okay, well, does anybody have anything else for tonight before we sign off? Okay. No reason to adjourn because this was never official. But if nobody has anything else, we can sign off. Good. All right.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Thanks, Mike.